Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the event on Winning Innovation Best Practices. I'm Jake Sherman. I'm a principal at the management consulting firm, Kuczmarski Innovation. And we're excited to have you all here listening this morning, depending on where you're tuning in from, whether it's the morning or the evening. I'd encourage everyone to hit the speaker view button if you haven't already, so you can see our speakers very well. And please keep yourself muted throughout the program. No matter which industry, sector, or country you're from, there's an opportunity to create new innovations that disrupt the status quo. And if you're wondering how to learn the basics, you've come to the right place. So I'm going to introduce our interviewer and featured speaker today, Meenu Arora and Tom Kuczmarski. So Meenu is the Assistant Director of Outreach at Krea University and a counseling psychologist and life skills trainer who has over 20 years experience working with students and working with students, parents, and teachers. In 2018, she received the Life Empowerment Award from the Center for Educational Development and an award for Innovation and Guidance in Counseling from ASCAP. She's a trained counselor from NCERT and has completed her master's in education and psychology. Meenu is going to be interviewing our featured guest for today, Tom Kuczmarski. As you can see, I'm just going to put up the screen right here. So Tom Kuczmarski is going to be teaching us the principles of innovation best practices. He's an internationally recognized expert in the innovation of new products and services. Over the course of his career, he has helped hundreds of clients, ranging from small businesses to Fortune 100 corporations, learn to systematically unlock the value of innovation. He's the academic director of the now virtual executive education course, Leading and Sustaining a Culture of Innovation at Northwestern University's Kellogg Graduate School of Management, where he's taught for the last 40 years. The co-founder of Chicago Innovation, a nonprofit organization which educates, connects, and celebrates innovators in the Chicago region. And he's the author of 8 published books on innovation and leadership. Tom?
Thank you so much, Jake, for introducing both of us. And here I would like to invite Tom. And Tom, I would like to ask you, in fact, of course, please take us through the presentation. And many a times I see that people get confused between innovation and creativity. And, so what basically innovation is all about. And innovation is a very important part of any organizational growth. That's what we see. And, we keep saying that innovation is one of the most important skill of the uncertain future. So right. How can a company use innovation to design different kinds of world products, services, and different kinds of things? So please, over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Meenu. Well, Meenu, first of all, it's just always so wonderful to be able to talk with you. I always enjoy that. And I think it's so important that we look at what the definition of innovation is, because often people confuse, just as you say, creativity, invention, patents with innovation. And that's not the case. And here's the biggest distinction. Innovation is all about creating new value for customers, for consumers, or for employees. See, we all come up with great ideas. Everybody comes up with lots of great ideas. And somebody will go, yeah, but I've got the best idea. I've got the best invention. I've got a patent. And my first reaction to that is, what problem or what need in the marketplace does that idea address and solve for? So that's really what we're in the business of, as innovators. Us as really good innovators are terrific problem solvers. And that's really one of the key messages that I want to convey to all of you. It's not about the idea that you've come up with. It's more about what's the problem in the marketplace that you're solving for. And that's what innovation is all about. And that's what we'll talk about more today. A great leading question. Thanks for that, Meenu. Should we continue on with some other questions, or should we go through a few of the slides?
I think it's good to go with the slides, and we can take up the questions at the end.
Terrific. Let's do that then, Jake. So I wanted to start with talking about the Chicago Innovation Awards. Here in Chicago, we started this 19 years ago to recognize and to really put a spotlight on all of the great innovators and companies here in Chicago. And what we've seen over the past 19 years is 310 winners of the Chicago Innovation Awards. Do you know that 98% of them are still in business today? It's just remarkable. And 50 of them have been acquired for an exit value of $108 billion. Now, what that says to me is that innovation indeed drives economic growth. And what we've seen in the Chicago region is a significant increase over the past 20 years of entrepreneurs, of tech, and of innovators of all types, large companies and small companies. And it's continuing on today more than ever before. Next. Over the past couple of decades, I've written and published 8 books. And I just want to highlight 2 of these today for you. One of them is the most recent one called Rising Together, which really does tell the story of Chicago's innovation ecosystem. And the other is Lifting People Up, that my wife, Dr. Susan Smith Kuczmarski, who you interviewed last week, Meenu, and I wrote, and it's all about the power of praise and recognition in the workplace. And it's something that is really key for innovators. See, innovation is hard, it's tough, it's risky. And what we need to continue to do to keep our team of people who are looking at new innovations, we need to keep them really feeling motivated and positive about themselves and about their teams. And that's what Lifting People Up is all about. But you can take a look at any of these on Amazon, and they've been great fun to write. So as I started with, innovation is all about creating and capturing new value for customers. And so my definition of innovation is that whatever you create, it has to offer unique benefits to the consumer or to the customer that are differentiated from competition, but ultimately is valued by the customer. Then and only then can you create economic value or money for the organization. You know, too often I find people say, okay, we gotta get some cash flow in the door and we've got to create something new. Well, that's wonderful to do, but only if it is something that's differentiated from competition and valued by customers. Now, on the right side of the screen there, you can see external innovation. And I'm a strong believer that all of these types are innovation. It can be a new business model, a new marketing program, a new service, a new product. It can actually be a new customer experience. And all of these are different ways of creating new value for customers. Likewise, innovation can be internal on the left side of the screen. It could be creating new partnerships or new sourcing arrangements or new business processes or a major cost reduction. All of this is part of the innovation pie. And so when you're thinking about innovation, think about all of these different types and ways to, you know, nowadays with COVID, I've seen new business models and new marketing programs be some of the most frequently generated innovations. And we'll talk about some of those in a minute. So that's how I define innovation. We also live in interesting times. You know, if I think back 20 years ago, the first question that an innovator would be asked is, well, where are you going to get your manufacturing capital from? How are you going to get $10 million in capital to create a manufacturing plant? Well, nowadays we no longer need that. And what I find so fascinating is that these 4 companies really don't own any assets. Alibaba owns no inventory. Uber doesn't really own any vehicles. Zoom doesn't own this meeting room. And Facebook creates no content. When you add up the market cap valuation of those 4 companies, you end up with over $1 trillion. $1 trillion in economic value. And these are companies and organizations that have created things just in the last couple of decade and a half. So it's really a very fascinating time that we live in, and it's a great time for innovators. And this next slide, and this next, I want to show just a 60-second video. And it's a video of a new innovation that was created by two women when they were students at the University of Chicago. And it addresses a real need in the marketplace. When you don't have electricity and you need a light source, this is their solution for that. And we'll talk about it in just a minute. If you could show the video now. Thanks, Jake. And the volume.
Is the video working okay?
No, no volume.
Okay. Oh, 1 second. Let me just stop and reshare. Sorry about that. Okay.
One of the things that we saw after the Haiti earthquake is that there were food supplies, shelter supplies, medical supplies, but one thing we really didn't see was light. Light is also just a very essential part of emergency aid. It's a solar inflatable lantern that packs up really small and flat and then inflates into a lightweight waterproof light. Approximately 1 in 5 people around the globe lack access to stable electricity. People have to use kerosene lanterns, which are extremely dangerous. There's all sorts of burn incidents that happen as a result of them, usually with small children. Oftentimes after a disaster, there are latrines that are outside the house and people become very afraid at night to have to go to the latrine, especially women and children, because they're afraid they might be robbed or someone might be kidnapped. And so having a light makes a big difference. When we went to Malawi, what they told us is that they use the lights often to look out for snakes. So having a light source like where you can look out for it actually was one of their main reasons for wanting light. You inflate it using the inflatable valve, and then you can press the button to illuminate it. So for 7 to 10 hours of solar charging, it gives you over 30 hours of light. We realized that lighting was a universal need, but not really at the top of the list in terms of emergencies. We saw that it could provide just a little added comfort to those families and those children.
Great. So, next. Meenu, I'd like to ask anybody that could answer this question now, if they could unmute themselves so that we could just highlight one of our participants to be able to answer the question, what are the drivers for success of this innovation? What do you see as the key component for success? And Jake, there's a big gray block in the middle of that screen now. Now it's gone.
So, is there any participant who would like to unmute and answer this question?
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Hi. I think the driver for this innovation is the need for this particular the Luminate product, the actual need, the purpose for which it was made. I think that is the driver for success.
Yes, I think you're exactly right. It's right. It's very clear that this addresses a real problem or need in these marketplaces. Why do you think this works so well as it relates to shipping it over to other countries? Because we can solve that problem with flashlights. We could solve that problem with big lanterns that would shine light. So what makes this one special? Anybody?
Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, the fact that it is low cost and the fact that it doesn't require any external equipment as such, like any other equipment, like torches require batteries. So I think this is what makes it work.
Yeah, well, that's true too, right? It doesn't require additional equipment of any type, exactly. And importantly, think about this. We now can deflate a Luminade into a tiny little package. So we could ship 1,000 of these in a box that enables us at a much lower cost to send them to a different country. If we tried to put 1,000 lanterns in a box, it would be boxes, it would be very expensive. So they've really been able to create a new innovation that addresses those needs in the marketplace, but also addresses the accessibility issue too. Great, thank you. Next slide. So we'll talk about real quickly these 8 things, and then Meenu, we can answer any questions relative to these. The way I summarize this page is that we have to define up front, in terms of strategy, what we want innovation to do and the types of innovations that we want to pursue. The second column, process, is all about forming a cross-functional team of people and then activating a process, an innovation process, that starts by understanding consumer problems, issues, and needs. And then third is we've got to wrap around a culture around that strategy and process that enables us to motivate people and lead people in a way that will enable them to take risks and think about things in a different way, and that we reward and reinforce their behaviors and celebrate success. I also will share with you why I think it's important to celebrate failure too, but all of that is part of building an innovation culture. So if you have a large company, a small company, if you're starting with a new idea on your own, if 2 of you have just started a new business, if 100 of you are now running a company, the culture is really an important component for innovation success. Okay, thanks. Next. So who knows who this company is? What's the name of this company? Can you tell by the logo?
Honda?
Honda, yes, it is Honda. And so I'll take you back a few years ago to a senior management meeting in the morning that was held by the CEO of Honda. And he started the meeting by asking the question, how many Hondas in 5 years from now will be in every garage? And so one executive raised his hand and said, 2 Honda cars in every garage. Chairman said, wrong answer. In 5 years from now, how many Hondas in every garage? And now another executive kind of sheepishly raised his hand and said, 3 Honda cars in every garage. Chairman said, wrong answer. In 5 years from now, 6 Hondas in every garage. Well, some of the executives looked at each other and they thought, oh my goodness, what is he talking about? You can't put 6 Honda cars in a garage, in every garage. But indeed, his innovation vision was putting multiple Honda products in the garage. So it might include a motorbike or a scooter and a hybrid car and a generator and a pump. Okay, maybe not the Honda Jet in the garage, but that was his vision. He also understood the value of internal innovation, whether that was through flexible manufacturing or just-in-time delivery. Both of those were part of his formula. See, one of the things that Honda did is they understood first the need in the marketplace. And I just find this so fascinating that 10, 15 years ago, US automobile makers thought that consumers wanted bigger cars were the better. oh, just get a huge Cadillac, get a huge Hummer, get a huge cars, and that's what consumers wanted. It's not what they wanted. Consumers wanted to be able to get around, and also get around in a way that would enable gas efficiency. So he was able to leverage the Honda brand name along with the need in the marketplace for smaller and the small engine technology that Honda had developed over many years. So it really was a formula for success. But as you see on the next page, in innovation strategy, you really have to think about 4 things. You got to think about the vision for innovation, the roles that you want it to play, the amount of new growth that you want to achieve from it, and then the screening criteria that you want to evaluate one idea versus another. If you've got these 4 components in place, and you've answered these 4 questions, and people on your team know the answers to these and agree to them, then you're off to the races, and you can really now begin the innovation, the pursuit of different types of innovation. Speaking of different types of innovation, let me just try to explain this to you. This was a study that we did with 700 different companies. 700 companies, both products and services. We defined the companies by the best versus the rest along these criteria. The first was, if over a 5-year time period, a company had generated at least 20% of their revenues from new products and new services, they would be defined as the best. In contrast to all the other companies that did less than 20% of their revenues as the rest. The best also, their innovations generated at least 10% in bottom line profits. So these were also companies that were profiting from their new innovations. Those were the best. With the best companies, we looked at the types of innovations that they were launching in the marketplace. And here's what we found. 17% and 22%, or 39% of the types of innovations that they were launching were either new to the world or new to the company. In contrast to the rest, where it was only 8 and 15 or 23%. A much smaller amount of the new to the world, new to the company. Look at 2 other numbers. Improvements with the rest. Improvements are just the new and improved. That was only 18%, in contrast to the rest, 42%. And in both cases, about 1/3, 30%, 31%, were line extensions. So look at the rest. If you add the 42% and the 31%, 73% of all the types of innovations that they're launching into the marketplace are low risk, closer in, little new and improved, little tweaks, line extensions, in contrast to the best that were launching much higher risk, new to the world, new to the company types of innovations. And they're the ones that are doing the best. Now, one last point I want to make though, the biggest number of failures come also from new to the world, new to the company. So that's where the biggest failures come, but it's where the highest returns come too. So that's why this is all about balancing risk and balancing a portfolio of different types. You know, let me just ask if there's anybody that has any questions on this one slide, because it's an important one to be able to convey that it's not about just one new product, one new service, one new technology, but rather a portfolio of them on an ongoing basis. Does anybody have a question on this? Yeah.
You can, anybody who has a question can unmute and ask.
Okay, good. I guess I explained it well, Meenu, huh? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like. So we can
Good.
go further. I have a lot of questions which were asked, on the form, Google form, which we
Sure.
circulated.
Terrific. Great. On the next, so this was a recent Chicago Innovation Award winner, Cameo. And I want to just tell you what Cameo is. You know, when you send a greeting card to your friend or spouse or a grandmother, a birthday card, or, well, this is a disruptive innovation that is a different type of greeting card, because now you can send from a movie star or a major sports player a customized card on video. So let's watch.
Cameo is a platform where people can book personalized video shoutouts from their favorite people. So we had the idea that cameos were the new autograph. So instead of getting somebody to sign something, now you can actually get your favorite person to say whatever you want to whoever you want.
Hey Mike, Brett Favre here. Hoping your fantasy team is doing very well.
I heard it's your birthday, and I just want to send my homie Roland some love.
Hey Rachel, it's Lance Bass. Just wanted to send you a video message saying happy birthday.
Team Cameo is extremely honored and excited to be one of the winners of the Chicago Innovation Award. Team, how we feeling? Cameo's
So I've often said that if I was an executive at Hallmark Cards or American Greeting Cards, I'd be sure worried about this new disruptive form of innovation called Cameo. Well, if all of you would be willing to participate in a poll, we're going to give this a try. Right, Jake? So the question is, what is the most important step in the innovation process, do you think? Is it brainstorming new ideas? Is it developing the prototype, actually developing the prototype itself? Is it creating a business case? Is it starting by understanding customer problems and needs? Is it estimating the financials, the revenues and the gross profits? Or is it starting with the development of an innovation strategy? So all you can do is pick one of those, but if you'd be willing to vote on this poll so we can see where you think the most important step is, that would be so great. And they can do that now, Jake?
Yep, they can do it now. We've got some votes coming in. We're just going to give it another 10 seconds and see if we can get everyone's vote, and then I'll post the result. All right.
Well, let's see how you did.
Can we see?
Okay. Well, Meenu, this is one smart. You just got the smart people to come today, didn't you? You just got the smart people to come. So 80% said understanding customer problems and needs, and 20% said brainstorming new ideas. And the 80% of you, right you are. That's the most important step of the process. See, as we'll see in a second, the new ideas have to come after we've identified the problems and the needs in the marketplace. Great, thank you. That was good to do. So let's take a look at this process slide. So let me explain. Step 3 is the step to generate new solutions or new ideas. And that's often where people and companies start. They start by saying, let's start here and let's have a brainstorming session and come up with creative new ideas. Or it may be your own idea, and that's where you started, right? So you say to yourself, I've got a great idea. The problem is that you've started too far down the process. Let's move back a step to step 2. Step 2 is where you go out and talk to customers or consumers to understand what their problems, issues, needs, and pain points are. See, this is the step that too often companies miss. And so then they've got 100 different ideas and they don't know which ones to move forward with. Well, the reason is because they don't know what problems they're solving. So what I even say to a company or to any of you that have created your own new idea, and now you think you're going to, move towards a prototype, I go, wait, you got to still go back in the marketplace and talk to consumers, talk to customers to understand their perception on whether or not this really solves a real need or problem for them before moving forward. And you got to do it with at least 10 or 20 or 30 different consumers and customers. You can't go ask a friend, because a friend will tell you, oh, that's a great idea, right? You need to go talk to some real customers or consumers. So the first step of this process is defining, in whatever category you're trying to innovate, what's the competitive landscape and what you're trying to achieve. The second step is understanding consumer or customer problems and needs. The third step is then generating solutions that will solve those. The fourth step is taking 10 or 15 of those and turning those into concepts. And a concept is a concept board. It's actually a physical board that shows a picture of the innovation that will describe it and have a price on it. And you can get reactions now to that from customers or consumers. Step 5 is to validate it now in a way that will enable you to create some financial numbers. Because this is an important part too of the innovation process, is developing a business case. And then step 6 is where you finalize the prototype. Step 7 is you create a go-to-market strategy. How are we going to sell this? How are we going to differentiate this? How are we going to promote this to customers and consumers? All of that prior to launch. And if you think about each of those steps being deliberate and definitive go, no-go steps, where you, at the end of each of those steps, you make a decision as to whether or not you move forward or not, it significantly increases your success rates. And that's why we do this process, as opposed to starting with step 3 with a new idea and then jumping to step 6 to create the prototype and then launch it in the marketplace. Nope. The probabilities of failure, if we do it that way, will be significantly higher. Our chances for success are much, much better following this type of process or approach. And Meenu, as we just go through these last few slides, if anybody has any questions, we won't stop for questions, but if anybody has any questions, they could either just, raise their hand or mention it to chat, or actually even unmute themselves is fine too. Okay. So the fourth is that we need to keep score and measure the return on innovation. And this slide is just really all about making sure that the return on innovation, which really means that in the numerator, you're just adding together all of the profits, losses, and cost savings that you've been able to generate from new innovations, divided by, in the denominator, all of the costs that went into creating them. For companies over a 3-year time period, their return on innovation should be 30 to 40%. They should be generating a 30 to 40% return on innovation. What happens if they're only generating a 5% return on innovation? Well, it doesn't mean that they should stop, but it means that they really need to take a look at why aren't they generating more profit from them, or why are their costs to create them as high as they are? So that enables you to look at both factors to be able to increase that overall return. And then we've got to look also at performance, process, and culture. And we've got to be able to keep score there too, and critically look at how well we're doing relative to previous years and relative to our goals and objectives. Great. Next. As I mentioned, innovation isn't a team sport. What? I thought it was. No, it's not. You can't go play a game of soccer against another team by yourself. You can't just have one soccer team member on the team. You can't ever win that way. The same is true with innovation. You can't go into a room by yourself and be innovative. You can't do it. So you need a team. You need at least 2 people, 3 people, 4 people to be able to have multiple people look at different ways and different perspectives on really how to address a problem and how to address a need and activate those 7 steps of the process. And one other thing is diversity counts. Diversity matters. So the best type of team is to have a diverse team of old and young, of men and women, of different cultures and races, of different functional backgrounds, people that have had experience in marketing and people in finance and people in operations and customer service. And so you're getting different perspectives as you go through this process. So a diverse and cross-functional team is key. And then number 6 is really the culture. And the culture is all about identifying the type of ideal culture that you want for your innovation team. And importantly, number 2, identifying the values and the norms that you want to operate against. You know, this also is a step that people will often overlook. They just assume that we've got corporate values. Well, you may have corporate values, but you need to have team values, and you need individuals on the innovation team to articulate what their own beliefs are, what's important to them, what behaviors, how do we want to behave with each other and communicate with each other to be able to have an open and risk-free environment. The third component of a culture blueprint is to define how we want to lead and the style of leadership. And number 4 is how do we determine the right rewards and recognition programs to make sure that we all stay focused on our innovation goals. And the last is we want to make sure that everybody at the top of an organization agrees to this, has discussed this, and sometimes we ask them to sign this on the bottom line. Sometimes signing it will help them to understand the importance of the culture blueprint. Number 7 is then aimed at providing praise and recognition programs. And this has to come in 2 different forms. We're strong believers in providing financial rewards for innovation teams, but financial rewards that are based on performance. So you don't get a big check for just for trying. This has to have demonstrated success in the marketplace. And I think often one of the best ways to do that is to take a small percentage, take 2%, take 3% of the earnings that have been generated from new innovations and distribute that equally to an innovation team. Or have a big component of a variable bonus be based on the innovation success in the marketplace. But I also think non-financial rewards are equally important. And that's giving people exposure to senior management, recognition dinners, luncheons, and being able to do this in a way that shows the value of the entire innovation team. See, that's what we do with Chicago Innovation. We provide public recognition for innovation teams that have created new value for their customers at the Chicago Innovation Awards. And then, as I mentioned up front, our book, Lifting People Up, talks about praise. And praise is the expression of approval, respect, admiration, or gratitude for someone or something that has been created. And praise is underutilized, and we need to do more of that. And we need to give people praise when it's authentic, of course, for the accomplishments that they've made to propel them forward. And then the last is really looking at the way in which we lead. And peopleship is the way that Susan and I have defined it. And peopleship is all about a different type of leader. It's a leader who is humble. It's someone who is compassionate, who's really focused on relationships. It's also someone who's transparent and open. It's the type of leader who's decisive, but decisive based on values, not just based on profits. It's a leader who believes in inclusivity, who's very inclusive and very collaborative, is not combative, is not competitive, but is really collaborative, not only with their employees, but also with their customers too. So that's how we define peopleship, as a leader who's humble, compassionate, open-minded, transparent, inclusive. And this often is a different type of ego than an ego-oriented leader who what we define as control and compete. And then 3 of our books, Rising Together, Lifting People Up, and Apples Are Square, all talk about those characteristics. So those are the 8 best practices for innovation teams and innovation companies that I wanted to share. But Meenu, please, any questions that you have would be welcomed now.
That was fantastic, Tom. And as I said in my last session with Susan also, today also, I will say the same thing, that every slide, every word is a takeaway for me. Because you said everything in such a concise and precise manner. And I just loved the last slide which you showed, the peopleship leadership, because that is so important, because many times people correlate leader with being authoritative, who just takes decisions and who works in silos. So that's very, very important, and that's very important for our future generation also. I know some MBA students are also here. So it's very important for students also to understand that these are the employers, they are looking for. And I've seen sayings from many employers, big industry leaders, and they do say that we value, collaboration, all this while when we are completing our education, people teach us how to compete. But when we enter the world of work, and especially the leadership position, we are expected to collaborate. So it is so important. And yes, inclusiveness is so important, because diversity is increasing nowadays because of the mobility, because of the globalization, and all thanks to this pandemic. When you were presenting, I also went through many examples in my mind, related to innovation, which we will be sharing if the time allows. And now, before discussing it further, I would like to jump on to certain questions. There were some questions which we got, on our Google form. And I can't see any question in the chat box. People, you can please write your questions in the chat box. And in the meanwhile, I will pick up questions which we have compiled earlier. So Tom, my first question to you is, what I feel that, many a times innovation, people stop because like you were saying that, being innovative is hard, tough, and risky. So people always have some kind of mindset, to leave their comfort zone and to enter into a discomfort zone, because, a lot of risk is involved. So I would like to ask you, what are some of the most common barriers that are preventing companies from innovating?
Yeah,
because company is made of these people.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, Meenu. I would say that the #1 barrier to innovation success in organizations is a fear of risk taking. People are afraid to take risks, and they're afraid to take risks for 2 reasons. The first is, if they take a risk and create a new innovation and it's launched in the marketplace and it fails, well, then their career is at risk. And in that type of company, if you remember back to the slide of the types of innovations that the best and the rest launch, those types of companies are always the rest. Because as a smart employee, we learn very quickly that it's safer for us to launch a lower risk, closer in type of innovation than it is for us to jump into a new to the world, new to the company type of innovation. But with that approach, you're never going to have a portfolio of innovations that will compete successfully in the marketplace. So how do we eliminate fear? How do we eliminate people's resistance to taking risks? And it has to start at the top. We have to have the senior leaders at the top of an organization be the group of people that are saying, no, 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 we do believe in taking risks. We are going to take risks ourselves. And here's how we're going to encourage you, reward you, and really recognize you for taking those risks. If you do that, very quickly, a culture can change within an organization. But until the senior people at the top do it, they can't just talk about it, because employees are always very, very smart people, and they see through that and they discern that that's not really the case. But once that's enacted, I mean fast, 6 months time, you can begin to see the culture change. Good question.
That's so true. And that reminds me, somebody said that a company can grow not if only the leader is smart, but if he hires people who can do smart things.
Yes.
So I think that is very, very important. So Tom, that leads me to ask you another question, that if a company wants to become more innovative, suppose the leader decides that, okay, let's move towards innovation, but doesn't quite know how and what is the first thing they should do. So what is your advice on that if somebody wants to introduce innovation in their companies?
That's a great question, Meenu, and here's my answer on that. Don't have a meeting. Don't have a meeting, but instead go out and talk to a customer. Go out and talk to a customer, and don't try and sell a customer something. That's the other thing. Don't go try to sell your product or your service to a customer, but go and spend an hour. You can do a Zoom call now very easily with a customer and understand their goals, their objectives. What are the things that they're struggling with, that they're worrying about? What are their concerns? What are their pain points? And starting there will enable you to begin to get an understanding of what the problems are in the marketplace. And that's the best way to start the whole innovation process. And it's also a good way to get out of the same way of thinking. If you start innovation by having an internal meeting with, okay, let's generate some internal ideas, you probably are going to generate some of the same old ideas that you've generated in the past. Going out and talking to a customer, 2 customers, 5 customers, 10 customers will give you a totally different perspective now on what the problems in the marketplace really are. So that's how I would start.
And how can a company learn to be less afraid of risk? Because once they start working on this idea, the risk is always involved and the company is always scared to face those risks. So how can they learn to be less afraid of risks?
By starting with by really thinking about the portfolio of different types of innovations. And you really need to start first with a couple of small successes. Let's not first look at the first item, the first new innovation we're going to launch in the marketplace is going to be a high technology, costly, 3 years to develop type of innovation. No. Let's not start there. Let's start with some improvement. Let's start with a line extension to our existing business line that will enable us to get our feet wet, to show some success in the marketplace, both for employees, but also to customers too. And so if we start small and then build up quickly after that, that's a good way to give people increased comfort that what they're launching in the marketplace will work.
Yeah, that's true. And many times, Tom, people say that, as employees, they really want to, try out something new. They want to be innovative in their strategies, maybe in their products, maybe in their marketing strategies. But many times, the boss and the manager they are not convinced. They feel that, we are running the business for so many years and we are into profits. We don't want to change. So is there any way out for these employees to convince their managers and leaders to implement innovation in their company?
Yeah, that's a great question, Meenu. It's actually a very common, I see that very commonly in companies. And here's what I always suggest. The first is take a look at what competition has done over the last couple of years as it relates to innovation. And the first thing to do is create a story on how well your company has done relative to those competitors. Where it gets so easy, in my view, is if one competitor in particular has been very successful at creating other new products and they're doing a lot better and their growth is a lot higher, well, that's a pretty compelling reason, right? Why our company needs to also get better at innovation. So see where your market share has gone over the last couple of years relative to competition. That can be a really number one way to convince management. A number two way is to look at other new products or services that you've launched, the company has launched, to see if there's increased gross profit margins. And if you're generating increased margins from new products and new services, that's another very compelling reason to do more of that. But that's a key point. You've got to be able to convince senior management on some key selling points on why innovation makes sense, whether it's from a competitive market share gain perspective or a margin enhancement perspective. So those are real world tangible reasons to pursue innovation.
Great, great. And also, Tom, when we look at, what the employers are looking for in this uncertain world for the future, and if we look at the World Economic Forum, surveys also, and many big companies who have done various kinds of surveys, and we see that we are moving towards the industrial, 4.0. So when we are moving towards Industry 4.0, which is mainly governed by AI and technology, we hear all these words as deep learning, machine learning, cryptocurrency, all kinds of technologies playing such an important role. So then, how does technology play a role in innovation, in the world? And when the world has already started talking about, in fact, Industry 5.0, they have started talking about humanizing technology. So what is the role of technology in innovation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the role of technology has changed so dramatically over the last decade. We have 3 boys, and our middle son, James, is the senior product manager at Google of Google AI. So I've been able to learn a little bit about artificial intelligence through him. And no, the computers aren't going to overtake the humans in the next couple of years. So we don't have to worry about that. But the role of technology is the enabler for innovation to happen in so many industries, services, and even products nowadays. So I often tell CEOs that they have to become technologists. They can no longer delegate that to somebody else in their own organization. They're the ones that need to stay current on what's happening with wearable technologies, on what's happening with solar energy, what's happening with AI, what's happening with crypto, et cetera, et cetera. So we all have to stay current in order to know how we can best apply technology to our own innovation spaces, and that's as important as really going out and talking to customers to understand their problems, issues, and needs. Is really doing a good landscape assessment of innovation of technology capabilities.
Great, great. And what do you say that people are inborn to be innovative, or there are some ways which can help them to learn the details of how to innovate? So how does it go?
Great question. I love that question. Are you born as an innovator, or are you developed as an innovator? And the answer to that, at least for me, is both. Yes, some people are born as innovators, but also people can be developed to become successful innovators. And Meenu, I love to describe it this way, jokingly. Physically, I say the best innovators are people that have really big ears, really big eyes, and a small, tiny little mouth. Meaning that innovators are people that listen well, observe well, and they're not talking all the time because they're more focused on trying to understand what consumers or customers needs are, and how best to make this innovation fit for them. And so that's what I say. But let me give you another more serious answer, although that is kind of serious, is that the way in which an innovator can be developed over time is by doing it again and again and again. And that's where the risk-taking plays such an important role, right? You can't expect an innovator to be successful the first time out. It takes second, third, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times out before you can really begin to see a success pattern. So practice is really part of that formula.
So Tom, when they practice, so sometimes, as you rightly said, sometimes they will succeed and sometimes they will fail. And in your presentation, you also talked about the role of praise and recognition. So when an innovator is going through success and failure and facing, various kinds of reactions from people, so, how does praise and recognition is important for an innovator? Does it stop him, or he still continues to be innovator? How does it affect?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, Meenu, because what I've found is that innovators have an internal sense of motivation. They're internally motivated. In fact, we've asked innovation teams, why do you innovate? What motivates you? And their response to us is that it's a sense of pride. It's a sense of accomplishment. I get turned on by creating something new. So there is, for sure, internal within innovators, a sense of movement, a sense of propelling forward that they'll continue to do. But what recognition programs provide is an explosion of that. Recognition provides a way for them to be able to get also other people as motivated as they are, and to create multiple teams of people within a company that are. So it's really in a sense, it's throwing magic dust on more and more people to get them as motivated as that intrinsic motivator, as that intrinsic innovator already is.
Great. Because many a times we feel that, many a times people get discouraged when they don't get the praise and recognition. So it is very, very important to sustain your interest in innovation. So
Right.
As I can understand, there are some people here who might be, planning to start their own company, or maybe they have their own company. So here I would like to combine two questions, Tom. That what are some things which a company can start doing today, because the future is uncertain, and many companies have faced a problem, of failure, because they could not survive in this kind of uncertainty. So what do you suggest for a company which they can start doing today to start creating a culture of innovation? Because I think now gone are the days when we used to have a creative department or innovative department. I strongly believe, and I heard this in one of your presentations, that every person of the company, of the organization has to be innovative. There has to be a culture. So how can a company start doing that? And what is the role of leadership in building that culture of innovation?
Well, and especially nowadays, Meenu, which is so more challenging, right? With COVID and our virtual work environments. But I think what's so key to that is we have to continue building relationships. And while the relationships now may need to be built virtually, at some point in the future, we'll go back to being able to have in-person relationships with people. But I think the world of virtual is now here to stay. And I think we need to have new technologies and new capabilities that'll enable all of us to build relationships in a way that can really, really replicate that in-person situation. But back to your question, what can leaders do to create this culture? And I think nowadays, the real key to it is giving people a sense of purpose, giving people a sense of value, so that when they come to work, whether it's on the screen or in an office, they're there every day because they're trying to satisfy and address a mission and a purpose that is meaningful to them. The mission and the purpose no longer, in my view, can be, let's make more money. That purpose, which used to be the way, right, is no longer doable. And in fact, what I've said for a very long period of time, when 20 years ago, I would hear people say the purpose of a corporation is to increase shareholder wealth. I would say, no, that's not right. That's the wrong definition. My definition of a corporation is to do the following. It is to exceed expectations of customers, to develop employees, to give back to the communities in which they compete, and increase shareholder wealth. So it really is all four of those that I think is what a company needs to be focused on. And so that comes back to purpose and value. And that needs to be understood and believed by all employees.
Very interesting. And I feel like asking more questions, but I think that will not be fair. I've asked you so many questions. So Jake, do we have any question in the chat box? Would anybody would like to unmute and ask any question to Tom?
Hi, Tom. I would like to ask a question.
Hi.
Hi, I loved the webinar, by the way. Like, it was really, really interesting for me. I am looking to study innovation at a master's level and also start off as an innovation consultant, hopefully create a firm in India, because I see there's a lack of it here. There are no innovation consulting firms in India as such. So I wanted to know from your end, what does it take to become an innovation consultant? And what can I do right now as someone who's entering the industry to improve my chances of success?
Sure. Well, I think there's two ways you can think about it. You can go at the route of from a technology standpoint or from an engineering standpoint, which would be more focused on the prototype development angle, right, of innovation. But what I think the best way to do it is to become well equipped in being able to do consumer and customer research, idea generation, concept development, so that it's the upfront parts of the process of innovation. If you could become good at that, I think that's a great platform for building a career in innovation.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Shivani, for asking this question. And Aditi has one question. Aditi, you can unmute yourself and ask the question directly.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
So I would like to ask you that how can I build up my own startup or a company all by my own and in these days probably online?
Sure. Again, you've got to be able to well, tell me what category, what general idea do you have, or what's the overall type of company you're looking at starting?
So for right now, I'm looking at a startup which deals with people's problem, like overall problems, like solution is a global problem right now. Also like handling like social medias and into media's company, something like that.
Sure. Well, I would start by getting a group of 5 or 6 people together and having a good hour conversation with them to be able to get their perspectives. And the benefit of getting 5 or 6 people together all at once is that what one person says will spark an idea with somebody else, will make them remember, oh yeah, that is an issue for me too, or whatever. So you'll be able to get some good dialogue going. And that's how I would really start. See, it all comes down to defining the right problem, defining the right pain point, and then enabling and using technology to address those. Good luck. That's exciting.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
That
you.
answers my question. Thank you, Meenu ma'am.
Terrific. Well, Meenu, this was delightful this morning. Thank you so much. Jake, isn't Meenu the best?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Tom. And actually, I don't want to stop this session because I have a lot of questions in my mind. So maybe I will continue my conversation with you later on.
Great.
And I tell you the question and I will take the answer maybe after a few days when you have time, that how innovation is applied in education. You know,
Yep,
so
yes.
so we will have this conversation maybe later because I know we have already extended our time.
No, but
Jake?
actually, that's such a let's have that be our last question, Meenu, because
Okay.
I love that question. Because
Great,
education,
great.
yeah, well, because education has been forced to change because of COVID. And Susan and I just did with Jake too, did a course at the Kellogg School of Management where I've been teaching for the last 40 years. We did our very first ever virtual course and it was fantastic. It was great. And even though I love teaching in person, there's some big benefits in doing this online. One is there's no commute time, right? And we have students from around the world attend our Kellogg course. Well, now they can just sit in their own homes, not have to go anywhere. I think education needs to change most dramatically in this fundamental way. We need to give students experience. It can't be going and sitting in a classroom and listening to a professor. We have to give them real world experience in internships and hackathons and ways in which they're engaged with people in the community, in business and nonprofits. And they have to have that experience count as credit for getting degrees. I think if we're able to blend together new approaches to give students real world experience along with more academic, right, learnings, I think that combination will be key for future universities. And I think they're going to have to change to make that shift. It's also gotten too expensive, at least in the United States. Going to a 4-year college, going to graduate school costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, it's really costly. So we've got to find new ways also to bring down the cost of education so that more people can make it accessible. So I'd say those two things in particular, Meenu, we need to innovate against.
Yeah, that's great. And in fact, if there is anybody here, you know, who is a management student or who is teaching in the Management Institute, then please take this message forward. And I think we need these kind of webinars, you know, for students, for our professors, you know, that how innovation is such a special and most important ingredient of your success for the future. So I will stop here. Jake, do you have any other question, or shall we wind up?
No, I think that's great. We covered a lot of great information and answered a lot of the questions actually that came in. So thank you both very much for this great session. I hope everyone enjoyed it and learned a lot from it, but we really appreciate you taking the time to tune in today.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Meenu. So great to be with all of you. Have a great evening. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jake. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Susan, for joining us.
Yes.
And thank you, everyone, for taking out time in the evening. And I'm leaving my email ID in the chat box. If you want to write to me, if you want to organize such webinars for your institute, please write back to me. I will coordinate. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.